Episode 114 of Genn and Millie, where a Gen Xer and a millennial share the strength-based perspective. Oh, please. I've been talking a lot over the holidays. The strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess. Side note, I do have a lisp.
Oh,
and
what?
Yeah. And if I have a glass of wine, you'll get real familiar with it. But I'm not having a glass of wine during this recording, although we should sometime. Anyway, I sometimes have a lisp, and I sometimes get in a hurry with my words, as we have had this happen on the podcast before, where I will create them. So strength-based perspective is always a shmush for me.
Okay.
And it actually shmushed to fruition.
I love it. So your lisp on a glass of wine. Mine is, I have been told, I slip into a deeper Minnesota accent after. And I'm sure that you all will hear it deeper today because I just got back from 5 days in Minnesota. So I'm sure that it is going to be thick because my family has very strong Minnesota accents, even though we are from southern Minnesota.
The O sound.
Yes.
The O sound? Okay. I'll be listening for it.
And just the twisting of the vowels, like the way, like if it's an EA, an OA.
Can you give us an example?
I don't know. It's just gonna it'll come out, I'm sure. So
I had a dialogue. I've had quite a few actually recently about how people say things differently based on where they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
I say syrup.
Not syrup?
Not syrup. Syrup. So that's just one of the words we can throw out today. That's not going to be the focus of our conversation, I hope.
No.
But it is, I think, for those who are regular listeners, they probably we have a rhythm.
Yes, certainly.
It usually starts with some kind of mistake I make, shenanigans, off topic, that then goes into topic. So there we have it.
So speaking of off topic but not off topic, I flew back from Minnesota yesterday after the or on Christmas Day. We're recording this on the 26th. So I flew on Christmas Day. It's always my favorite thing to fly on holidays because flights are cheaper and the airports are not as busy. So I'm like, we don't have, I have my big Starman family Christmas shenanigans, and that always usually falls the weekend before the holidays, so it always works fine for me to fly on Christmas Day. So I was flying yesterday, and I was reading. I had my Kindle. I was reading a book. I had this long layover, 3.5 hour layover at Midway in Chicago. And so I posted up at a bar and ordered a beer and started reading my book. And everyone around me was chatting with one another because the Chiefs game was playing, right? And I'm like, you're looking at me. Your anticipation is so funny. Your face. But I was just reading my book, right? Sipping my beer, reading my book, right? And everyone else is very focused in making comments and making friends with one another in solidarity of the Chiefs game that's going on right now against the Raiders. And so I'm reading, and there's a guy that sits next to me, and he pulls out a physical book, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Reading a physical book, you don't see that very often. I read a physical book with me. You don't see anyone reading very often, right, at an airport anymore. Every once in a while, or if you do, I always like to see people who brought a book because they feel like they need to when they travel. And you can tell they're 5 pages. They just start the book at the airport rather than actually just being a regular reader and bringing your books along. So anyway, we sit for a while, and I've thought a lot about this, about my headphones. And normally I have my headphones on all the time, but for some reason I chose not to have my headphones on as I was sitting here at the at the bar reading my Kindle book and sipping on a beer. And so after a little while, like, he asks what I'm reading and strikes up a conversation. And so then I ask what he's reading, and then we get into books, and he asks me if I like my Kindle, and I say the pros and cons. I'm like, I also like audiobooks. I also do a lot of physical books, so it really kind of depends on what I'm reading and where I'll be reading. And but I show him some of the features. He's like, I'm thinking about getting one, and then we start talking about our best books of the year and what recommendations. We have a little bit of overlap in the kinds of books that we like to read. Like, he likes to read more like hardcore fantasy stuff. I'm like, historical fiction, romance, some fantasy, like that kind of. So anyway, so he gives me a recommendation for a series. I give him one, and we probably talked for a solid 30 minutes. So I talked to a stranger in the airport, and he had to go catch his flight. I had to go catch mine. I mean, we talked too about like where we were coming from, where we were going, got to know each other a little bit. But I thought you would be very proud of me. It's only like the third stranger I've ever talked to in an airport, because normally I'm like headphones in, all this kind of stuff. So anyway.
So much here that I had to actually, did you hear me get my pencil out?
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, like, where I'm going with this. You know what I want this story to end with. Like
we exchanged contact information.
You did?
And
You
no,
did?
we didn't. No.
Damn
That's where I knew you wanted me to go.
Damn it. I was like, here comes the love story of all love stories. And all of us in the Genn and Millie universe are hearing this for the first time.
Actually, what? He was fairly attractive. I would,
What in the hell stopped you from getting his number?
Multiple things. One of the things which I have to tell you offline.
Okay, so what I wanted, okay,
I know
this is a really good example of where Allison could manage her expectations better. Beautiful story. I did not mean to wreck it by saying
to a stranger.
Yes,
in an airport,
excellent.
Which I normally don't do, and I actually walked away very not annoyed that my time was taken away from my book, but really enjoying the conversation with a stranger. That is period the end.
Yeah, and that is enough. That is enough
in and of itself, Allison.
Right. So my apologies for, as per usual, me coming in with a higher level of expectation around love. Mm-hmm. This is clearly something I should investigate a little bit. Like, all stories should end in a holiday rom-com. I mean, this is just
unrealistic.
It is. It's not realistic, number one. Number two, it says a lot about what I try to project onto the universe. So my apologies for my lack of celebration with the end, period, stop, because that is huge for you. A couple things. Airport beers are really something. They taste different. I believe that the container in which we consume whatever it is that we have normally, it tastes different. It's just a different. Mine happened to be a mimosa from the Portland airport on Friday morning when I got delayed. And it was not the best mimosa of my life, for sure. My mimosas are heavy on the Prosecco splash of juice. But she minted it up and made it look really pretty. And I felt like, based on a delay, I was already getting festive. So really, really, interesting way that we see that. Also, airport beers should be celebrated with others. Like,
no.
Yeah, like
not
airport.
Necessarily.
Yeah, that's the bar is like fellow travelers. Cheers.
What I love about the bar is that everyone looks in the same direction, not at each other.
Oh, I think everybody looks at each other.
No. A bar, like a counter you're all sitting at.
Yeah.
You're all looking.
And usually the bartenders are extra friendly.
Yes,
and chatty.
I had a long layover in Nashville on my way to Minnesota, and I actually, I chatted with the bartender for quite a bit. Yeah.
So I feel like we switched bodies the last couple of weeks. So I was traveling Portland and headphones in the whole time, did not speak to anybody.
Love it.
Went to dinner, didn't speak to anybody, just kind of really in my own sort of soul space. Fun, quick story about my on-brand experience. So I am out of my right notebook. So I've been filling these puppies up and I'm out. So I hadn't had time to get my newest set. So I thought, well, I'll just take an in-between notebook, which is just kind of a canvassy sort of, not going to be a long-term journal, kind of an in-between. Yeah. I'll take this with me to Portland. I'm writing away on the plane like I do, not talking to anybody, keeping to myself, music playing. This is, again, different zone, but I'm like always writing. I left that notebook in the back. Oh, and I mean, no is right. No. All I can think to myself is, please let those amazing people who do the cleanup on the plane that comes zippity-doo-dah through, as you're like getting your carry-on and there's zip, zip, zip. I hope they went zip and went right to the trash with that thing, because if anybody read it, anyone, I'm hoping there was not a business card in there. Sometimes there is. Anyway, oof. So
I assume, I know that you say this about your journal and your writing, but the romantic brain in you made me think that you might have gone to the space of like, oh my gosh, I hope someone very easily finds an identifiable piece and like tracks me down, mails it to me, and I'm reunited with my journal that I left on a plane in Portland or whatever.
Not this journal, okay? Others, yes, but not this journal. This one was just capturing some rant, and holiday season rant. Some insecurity, what I do lately is I write best case scenario and worst case scenario. Okay. And I write them in 2 columns, and then that helps me to get to what's actually realistic and what part of this narrative are you just creating that's chaotic, that, makes you feel like crap. The worst case scenario stuff, pretty raw. The best case scenario stuff, pretty dreamland. Yeah, so
you got heavy, unrealistic both ways.
Also, there are humans in this notebook with names who could possibly be on a plane, a United plane, and might pick it up and say, wow, that handwriting looks familiar. Shit, that's my name. So anyway, I'm currently operating in terror that someone is reading it. So that's one. Airport beers, yes. The other is I carry lots of books with me at all times. And I don't know if we've ever asked this question, but I've been having some great conversation with my brother, who I play Wordle against every morning. We now play Connections, and we also play the crossword. And it leads to deeper conversations, which I love having with Ben. But Ben and I both read multiple books at a time.
Yeah.
You?
I will, so long as they are different. I will read multiple books at a time, but I will only ever read 2, maybe 3 books at a time. Generally, it's only 2, and it's because when I start a fiction book, I want to finish it before I get to the next one, and the same with nonfiction. So generally, the most I'll ever be reading at a time is 2 books, 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction, because I read at different paces for both of those, and they just work different parts of my brain, right? So
yeah, I think I read fiction throughout, and nonfiction I'll piece around. I don't seem to stay on track with a nonfiction like I do a fiction. And I have a stack. I'm getting ready for my mountain retreat, and I have a large stack of books, most of them fiction, but a couple nonfiction that I'm looking forward to. So I very much appreciate the fact that you stretched
I will say, okay. It was a stretch because I engaged in the conversation. I did not start it. I will say that. Nor would I have started it. But once it was started, I very much engaged with it.
Was there any identifying information about you that he could look you up?
Stop.
Was there?
Yes, there was. I mean, I shared, well, he, like, we ended up what do you do? And, we exchanged names and all that, like, first names. But I was like, he knows I live in D.C. He knows I'm a PhD student and a professor, or adjunct, instructor at a couple universities. So certainly.
Okay, that's all. Just asking. The other thing I wanted to mention is the visceral reaction I have to people drinking and reading. That is a hard no for me.
What?
I will not consume alcohol and read.
Why?
I don't know. I'll listen to music. I'll obviously go to concerts, experience life, but like reading is very sacrilegious to me. There's no. I'll have hot chocolate. I'll have tea, but I will not read and drink wine at the same time. Am I odd?
That's very odd. That's one of my favorite things to do. Put a record on, light a candle, pour myself a glass of Pinot, and open my book. Like, it's the
okay,
most
that's too many
space.
senses. That's too many senses. Too many senses are exposed there. You're listening to music while you're reading?
Oh, yeah. I mostly do, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No.
I almost always listen to music while I read because it sets the tone. But we've talked about this before. We've talked about this before on this podcast because I do not listen to the lyrics. It's about setting the tone, the ambiance, the vibes. Yeah. I don't listen to the lyrics when that is happening. There are other times in which I very much listen to the lyrics when I'm listening to music, but it generally is when I'm only listening to music.
So when you post a picture of your fabulously done nails and your book, there may be wine in your other hand?
Usually on my coffee table, yeah. Because then I'll go and actually like sit. And actually, I've been thinking about, and I don't even need to justify it as my Christmas present. I got some ad of what looks like the coziest chair ever with a footstool, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna reorganize my apartment around this reading chair. Like, I literally saw it the other day, and I'm like, it looks so cute and so comfy, and the reviews are really great. It's not like overly huge, but it's like a bucket chair with it. And I was like, I think I might do a little stand or something so I can put my my wine there while I read. But yes, very often when I take like a picture of what I'm currently reading, sometimes I'll very often do tea or coffee as well, and then sometimes a beer or wine. It totally depends what I'm doing, but I generally always have a drink when I'm reading, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, sometimes just seltzer water, and then almost always a candle lit, and sometimes, most often, music in the background. Yeah.
Great question for our listeners. A bunch of questions in there. Mm-hmm. Also, I love the fact that you choose one item to build an aesthetic around. When I was dining at this fabulous restaurant in Portland called Dame, they had the setup of their bar. I was seated. Jeez, I was seated at the bar, and so they have vinyl that they're playing, and then they had these two really cool shelves. And as I looked at them, I was like, I could do this. I could create this. And actually, in the notebook that is now hopefully in the trash on United somewhere, I sketched it out. And I sketched out my living room space around creating this new shelf.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah, I wish I had it. And along with all those words that hopefully are not being read by others. I really envision me burning this note, but it's like a burner notebook. Like, I'm just going to trash this thing later. Just get all this stuff out. But then I also captured some really cool stuff. Like, we're in the full moon. There's some really cool ritual I like to do this time of year. We're in my favorite days. And one of them is 12 wishes. It's actually 13, but 12 wishes. So you start on Christmas Day, and you write down 13 wishes that you have. You roll them up, put in a piece of paper, roll them up, put them in a jar. Mm-hmm. And then each night, for 12 nights, you take one of those wishes out and you burn it. Mm-hmm. You don't read it, you burn it. So you gift it to the universe to take care of. There's 13 wishes because on January 6th, the wish that you open up and receive is yours to take care of.
Oh, interesting.
So, yes, I'm doing the 12 wishes, 12 days. And it makes you really thoughtful about what you wish for,
Yeah.
but also a reminder of what we can and cannot control. And so I had my 13 wishes written down in this notebook that hopefully no one is reading. Couldn't really remember everything. So started over, but same vein, same learning. And in that same vein of my favorite days of the year, I am loving some of the questions that have come up recently that I have sent to my clients, and have had some great conversations around the end of year and some of the things that we've learned from this year. Typically, this time of year, Tess and I are settling into our words of the year, but we are both undecided at this time, which I like. And we are both taking space to retreat. Mine happens to be an hour-ish north to the mountains. I'm going to spend a month in Frisco, so we will not be recording during the month of January. And Tess, you want to describe your trip?
Oh, yes. So if you regularly listen, most people know that I take a trip at the beginning of the year, my birthday, the yearly reset. Most often it's on my own. But this year's a big year, my 30th birthday, finally aging into my soul in a little ways, many ways. Like, I felt like I've been 30 since I was 22. So I'm really looking forward to being officially in my 30s. And I decided to invite friends and I think, did I talk a little bit about this process of, like, I wanted friends to come. So at first I was like, with everybody's unique, I have friends with kids and friends that are married and friends that are coming, that live all over the country. So at first I was like, hey, maybe I'll rent a cabin, like a fun place in Appalachia or Shenandoah, and just like invite people to come basically to me. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll do something like wine country in California, and I'm like looking and pricing things out, and I was just like, one of my aunt, when she came to visit me in June, was like, one of the pieces of advice she gave me when I was like kind of contemplating what I want to do. She was like, do the trip you want to do, invite everyone, and they can make the choice. Like, do what you want to do for your birthday. So
Right.
I knew I wanted to go somewhere international was what I would really hope to do. I wanted to go somewhere new I hadn't been before. The last few, both of my international trips this year actually were places that I'd already been before, so I was really wanting to go somewhere new. So anyway, I decided I have a group. There are 5 of us in total going to Portugal. So we are flying to Lisbon on the 1st, and then we will go to Porto for a day and a half, and then back up to Lisbon. So we'll be gone for a little over a week, and I'm very excited. The really neat thing about this that, like, my high relator, my high individualization is so excited about is the 4 people that are joining me are all from 4 different stages, groups, areas of my life. And some of them have met each other, but not everyone. Like, I actually don't have anybody that's like 2 people from the same group or same context that are coming. Like, I have one for my friends in Omaha, one of my friends from Denver, Chicago, one of my friends here from DC, and my sister. So like, it's going to be, it's a really, really good group. So I'm very excited about that. And I've like, here's my, I hope none of them will listen to this, I'm sure, before we go in a few days, but you can totally spot my individualization. I plan the itinerary for all different types. I have some history, I have some like food and wine, I have some culture, we have a tour with a local, we have a music night at like a local style of music we're gonna see a live show for, like a little bit of everything.
I love this.
And then I made like trip gifts for people. I made a little gift bag with like some like travel essentials and some of my favorite things, and then I'm gonna write a note to everyone, just like what I appreciate about them and having them in my life. And then there are a few things where like I got some like cheeky things to add to it, and then like a few Portugal things, and they're like varied. And so I picked like one of them is like a wine charm that goes on the bottom of a wine glass, and they're all Portugal related, and so I like matched the one to the right person of like which one I think is best with their personality or their vibe. So I had so much fun. I probably spent a month like, oh, this would be a neat thing to add, and then I found little gift bags. So I'm gonna bring all those and surprise them with like gift bag on their bed with some fun things when we get there. So
This is just the epitome of you as a friend, as a human. I mean, literally in the celebration of your birthday, you are gifting to others.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, absolutely, right? Like,
It-
their
I mean,
gift
well,
is
it
like
brings-
them coming in, like
Right,
them
it brings
coming, their
joy.
presence. Yeah, it does.
It makes me think about the podcast that we talked about last time, Adam Grant, that week that he sat and wrote feedback about here's how I see you at your best, here's where you are in your talent, here's how, I mean, kind of a, gifted people the story of how they uniquely and awesomely show up. He said it was the best week of his life. And I think that you are just really good at that, naturally really good at that. But I love that you have a specific plan and container and space for that important birthday to be celebrated.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So when we talk about the my favorite days of the year, for me, it's now because it's the end and it's also the beginning. It's like the most, in my mind, the most hopeful space we can possibly be in, because you have all of this learning that you've gleaned from the year that was, and you have all this anticipation for the year ahead. But you're coming into that new year with this kind of toolkit of learning that 2023 brought. So I have been asking some questions of my clients and a few friends, and I will share my responses to this that came really metaphorically to me fairly quickly, and then I'm working actually on a blog post about it to write specifically about the year that was. And while I'm sharing, Tess, I hope that you'll contemplate a little bit your answers to these questions. So the first question is, what has felt like success? And for me, 2023 has just been full of departures and arrivals. Very much navigation from things that I expected to change, but also things I wasn't expecting to change. And I'm learning how much I love travel. The obvious leaving of my role at Teammates in a long-time role had a big effect. It was a big event in my life. But the choices, including that choice, the things that I said yes to, the things that I said no to. I've been to 9 new to me cities and many new containers. So I had some amazing opportunities this year to witness other people, other humans. And in my mind, it's been like one big airport scene. Like, I love the airport because of the departures and the arrivals and the sheer love and magic that happens between humans. Yeah. So that's my answer to that first question. My second question is, what has felt like big learning or stretch? And my big stretch this year is flying my own plane. Solo artistry and all the responsibilities that come with it. When Lauren was little, she used to say, I'll do it myself. It wasn't myself. She added an A on the end. I'll do it myself. And I think that's what has been big learning and stretch for me is going from being part of a band to a solo artist. Naming strategies that helped and how I would apply them in 2024. So the strategies I've learned this year is that I need systems and I need logic. Compartmentalization, applying my brain to things. So having a set compass, having maps, having directions, having GPS, but having great co-pilots and a great crew. And then the last question is, how will you or how have you celebrated? Leaving well has been my celebration this year. And I'm going to do that by arriving in Frisco. And that space and time will honor me reviewing the travel logs of 2023 and the flight plans of 2024.
Oh, look at that
Definitely took a theme this year.
took a little bit of a theme. That's that communication in action.
Sure is.
Beautiful there. Wow, wow. All these questions I think are really great, and I appreciate the way in which you, synthesized them well, distilled some of your major learnings well with this kind of analogy. So it's great. It's great. I feel like this will not be as poetic because I got this an hour ago and had to calm my dog down before we recorded, so I really didn't look at the questions too much. But so for the first one, what has felt like success? We talked a little bit about this in the green room. I've had a lot of change this year, and change that I did not consent to, and so it's brought about a lot of learning. So I guess this is a little bit one and two together. It's brought about a lot of learning and growth for me, but also I feel like, and I know I talked about this during the last episode with JC, or the episode maybe before that, I would go back, but I don't know that I would change a lot of the ways that I responded to things. So end of a relationship and a summer of really grieving, but also learning life with a pup, and some travel, and just being in joy, and some shifts in a really positive way around my program, and needing to orient myself to a more accelerated timeline with that. My grandparents, I told you in the green room, sold their house this year that they bought when my dad was born in 1966. And so it's been the gathering place. It was the place that I went almost every day after school because it was around the block from my elementary and middle school and 2 blocks away from my high school. I have family that's moving out of the area for different reasons. And so there's just a lot of change that has happened this past year. And because I generally am a solo flyer and have been for a long time, almost all of my change is change that I've worked for or intentionally moved towards. And most of the change this year has not been that. It's been circumstances around me, people around me, that has had a rippling effect in my own life, directly or indirectly. And so even just being home for Christmas this past weekend was so great to see everybody, but it took place at my parents' house because my grandparents now live in a much smaller place, and so it couldn't quite fit everyone. So my parents have become the de facto hosts of Christmas from here on forward. Same Christmas china and same Christmas, crazy traditions we have. This year we had to do 4 scenes from a Christmas movie that had different, one was one was a still shot, one was a pantomime, one had to have a prop, one was full voice or something like that. And so we still did our crazy Christmas shenanigans, but it looked so different. And it's really stretched me, but also I feel like it's also been a test, as my entire life is, of integrity. And so choosing to navigate that well, choosing not to avoid the grief or numb the grief with those changes. And of course, you can hear a little bit of my voice, they're all really present, just having come back from that weekend in Minnesota, with it looking so different than it always has been, but in some ways so much the same. So they generally don't conflict, but my first 3 strengths in my set have very different time orientations. Context is past focused, adaptability is very present focused, and strategic is a future focused strength. And so my first 3 strengths are past, present, and future in their orientation. And generally those work very seamlessly together, right? It's a recalling of what we've done to make sense of what's happening now to plan for what comes next. Very often they work together seamlessly. Right now, when I'm not planning for the future, or planning for change, and when change is put upon me, they've come into tension a little bit. So it's been a learning process, certainly. So third, the question is that name strategies that have helped and that you'll consider applying into your 2024 goals. So My 2023 word of the year was momentum, which was a build off of equilibrium. And the year did not pan out like I thought it would when I had that intention for the year at all. But it's been so cool, as it always is, to see how life unfolds and how it does align with the intention still. And so I kept thinking, even like the finals week, and then the week, I had about a week and a half to almost 2 weeks after finals before I left for the holidays. And I created this like beautiful rhythm that felt very natural, of like a slow coffee in the morning. I would work 5 or 6 hours on something, sometimes sit at a coffee shop, sometimes work here. Then in the afternoon, I would lay low or clean or do something like for myself. I've incorporated more movement into my daily life recently, just as an intention on my own part. And I have found that I was able to get through things. I got through about half of my to-do list over winter break within the first 4 or 5 days of winter break, even though I have over a month. And just like the way in which still taking those breaks, having a slow start to the day, George 100% helps with that, because after he wakes up, he just wants to sit in my lap and cuddle and hang out for a bit at the start of the day. Like these sorts of, which is entirely what equilibrium was about. And I feel like my life circumstances in the year of equilibrium allowed me to achieve it. And now that my life circumstances in momentum, wanting to carry that equilibrium through, now that my life circumstances are not forcing that, I find that I'm still really enjoying that, right? So in many ways, it's measuring and seeing the fruit, seeing the results, seeing the outcome of still taking that time to rest. Dedicating time to work, but taking time to rest. And I'm really surprised already at seeing the outcome of that. And so I'm excited. I really want to carry that through, especially through this next year, which will be almost exclusively dedicated to dissertation. A lot of work ahead in 2024, but I know that taking that time has just made me a much more peaceful person internally. It's made my soul much more peaceful, and I've really enjoyed it.
It's interesting that momentum did not equal speed.
Yes.
It was more, it provided more of a metronome.
Yes.
For you, for rhythm and the cadence. And I think that's a really important part of what American culture tells us about speed and accomplishments and to-do lists and go. And it is very challenging to turn your metronome to a slower tempo.
Yeah.
But it is really powerful, I think, when you do.
Absolutely. And I think that was always that's a good clarification. My momentum was always about continuing the equilibrium of balance between work and rest, of balance between joy and seriousness in terms of my pursuits. So momentum from that was always about quality, was always about not neglecting myself for the sake of my work. And it was never, in many ways, never about speed. It was always about continuing to carry on and continuing to increase quality, intentionality, presence, things like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know, as you mentioned, I don't know what my word of the year is for this next year, but I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds. But yes, it reminded me actually, and something that you mentioned, especially in academia, but I think in a lot of our world, there's this need to produce and work and get stuff out there. And there was, of course, as there always is, this big debate on Twitter. Some young scholar was like, graduate students, PhD students, give yourself the gift of writing this Christmas, right? Sit down and write every day. And he even posted that when Christmas break was starting, right? And then he posted it again. I saw him post it yesterday on Christmas Day, like in the morning. He's like, well, I got up and wrote at 5 a.m. and I wrote for 4 hours before we started our family Christmas. And there's all these people in the comments like, yes, so true. Like, this is great. And then there are people that are like, do not listen to this. Like, you need rest and you need time away. And so certainly in certain industries, certainly in academia, but also you're right, just the pressures of society, of living in a capitalist state, right, equate our sense of worth with what we can produce. And so it's been a really, really good reminder of rest and of the beauty in that, and how I become a better producer when I take that time away. Mm-hmm.
You know, I continue to learn from your wise old soul that you are. That is a strong intention of my time coming up this next month. Birthday month is something I celebrate. I'm celebrating it very differently this year, with taking intentionality of slowing things down, of not traveling, of not thinking that work is the only measurement of my worth and value. And what I did over the holidays, returning to Nebraska unexpectedly, I was not planning on that at all. And I was requested to come home to my family, which was a really remarkable sort of full circle when it comes to my relationship with my stepdad. And so I went home and I deliberately didn't write, and I didn't read, and I did present reflection. I tried as much as possible to be completely in the moment and out of my head and out of my heart, and just right there with whomever I was lucky enough to be with, whether that was letting my nephew and niece and nephew drive the Bronco and be a passenger, which was a total example of me just surrendering a little bit. But listening to them and what they're excited about and what they're dreaming about and what they think. Listening to my mom tell a story that I've probably heard 100 times, but I hear it differently at 48 than I did when I was 35 or 20. To hear my aunt, who has gone through just tremendous grief, talk about her choosing to live a big life now in the midst of that. She lost both her husband and her daughter to cancer same year. And Janet is more determined than ever to just live authentically and big. But to just hear that and then not feel like, okay, I have to get up in the morning, I have to write about all these things I'm learning, but just actually trust my soul to take the learning on and to be more present. I also want to note that George is so much a part of your year of momentum. He is not something that you can tame or slow down, and you can hear him in the background, which I love that has become part of our aesthetic. You know, I can hear George breathing, snoring sometimes. It's like, great. Gosh. It's a reminder of important rhythm.
Yes, you're right. He does not breathe quietly, so it is a reminder to breathe. I love that. And then, I talked about a little bit their last question, how will you celebrate? Certainly my Portugal trip is a celebration. But I'm thinking through a lot around how to celebrate. I have a lot of really important milestones this next year in my program. I have to take my very last class that I will take in the spring, then I'm all done with coursework. I will be celebrating the approval of my proposal, and I will be celebrating my hopefully successful passing of my major exams at the end of the spring. All of these things, right? And so finding ways to mark them and to celebrate them, certainly, knowing that they're it's not the end, right? That doesn't grant me the degree, but those are all things necessary for getting there. So lots of that within this next year. So I'm excited to think through how to best celebrate that.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
I know you don't like getting the questions last minute, but I do, from my perspective, think your most brilliant thoughts, and I've always seen this in you, come on the fly. They really do. I think of our windshield time and how this podcast started.
Yeah.
It was when you would I just shoot a question your way? It's like prose that you beautifully articulate. I know you don't love it. I think selfishly I do, because I hear you leaning in to whatever those words are. You know, I mean, I'm a lover of words. My hope is part of this celebration that I'll take the time to do is write those letters and those notes of gratitude to the people who have impacted my life the most this year. There have been some big surprises in my year of the people who have shown up in my life. There have also been surprises of the people who have not, and what that has taught me. But my hope is to, write these notes of gratitude. But I think this space, this container that you and I have, is such a gift to me that I can trust that you're going to be authentic and in integrity wherever you are, but particularly in this container. And there's such an accountability that holds me to. I think about these conversations far beyond this time that we record them, and I always listen back. And I think I write down things that you say and things that you share. So we started this because of, generational differences and wanting to see strengths as complementary. But I don't know that it's ever been more present to me that we're very different. We have different views on the world, but you make me a better version of me, for sure.
Oh my gosh. Ditto all of it with my lower communication. Just ditto, just ditto it all, ditto it all. Yeah, I'm very, very grateful for this space. It always, I'm sure there's a little bit of like whenever you pause to have these sorts of conversations, it's the right time. But it always seems like the conversations come at the right time. So I'm very grateful for that, and very much looking forward to, we'll have to be mindful of, we won't probably guess each other's words of the year then if we won't share them until February. So I'm sure I will want to put mine out there for public accountability purposes. So we'll be able to talk through that when we reconvene in February, around what led us to that. So, all right, with that, I'm like, I now have a restless dog over here. But so let me just run back those questions for our listeners, and we'll be sure to type them out too in the show notes. Number 1, what has felt like success? Number 2, what has felt like big learning or stretch? 3, name strategies that have helped and consider how you'll apply them to 2024 goals. 4, how have you or how will you celebrate? So we would love to hear some of that year-end reflection from people as we think back through this past year, the 2023 year, and we look forward to 2024. So then, without further ado, I want to thank you for tuning in to episode 114 of Genn and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. To interact with us and share your responses to the questions that we pose, the best way to do so is by giving us a follow on Instagram at Genn and Millie. That's at GennandMillie. Until next time.